Speaker, and always an honour to stand and speak to legislation. This is the budget time of the year, and as we know, it's the same process each and every year. This time in spring, it's late night sitting here in the House of Assembly, and as my colleague mentioned, there's a mandatory number of hours that this budget has to be debated and so on. And here we are. So, of course, always a pleasure to represent the people of Harbour Grace Portagrave District. And that said, being springtime, being budget time, it's also preparing for the tourism season, especially in my district. And we just kicked off just last week with Bay Roberts' annual Song, Stages and Seafood Festival. It was the 13th annual. And again, that event grows and expands and each and every year, and I think everybody has a great time. Also pleased to work with the department and to get that continued funding that's been given each and every year, of course, for that seafood festival. And as well, we entertained, of course, my colleague, the Minister for Tourism, was out, and she enjoyed her time, I think, in Bay Roberts at the festival last week. And there's going to be much more happening. Also recently, we just celebrated, and Speaker, you would know, and I think the province was paying attention, the Amelia Earhart statue. As we know, about a year ago this time, that statue disappeared in the wee hours and darkness. As we know, it's not funny. People, were disappointed and sad, and even scared, that such an act could have happened. As we know, Amelia Earhart has very, very significant history with aviation history in Harbour Grace, and helped put Harbour Grace on the map for aviation. Almost 100 years ago in the 30s, she took off from the historic airstrip. And I encourage you to make the trip out there. We've got the Harbour Grace Regatta coming up. Yeah, the Harbour Grace Regatta going up this weekend.
I was there this weekend.
You were perfect. And the annual Harbour Grace Regatta, which is actually the second oldest continuing sporting event in North America, second to the Royal St. John's Regatta. And it's a big ordeal at Lady Lake every year. So I certainly encourage you, Speaker, and my colleagues, and anyone to make that historic excursion around the bay. There's lots to see out there. Come out and see Amelia. It is the original statue. A big thanks to Morgan MacDonald for the work of putting her back together. It's good to see her there in her rightful place there in Harbour Grace, next to the airplane, the Spirit of Harbour Grace airplane, which was donated by the Pike family, who continue to contribute to our community. And of course, the SS Kyle, which is adjacent there in the harbour. And that's a sight to see. I mean, obviously, that's been there quite some time, before I was born. And I went to school in Harbour Grace at the then school, St. Columbus. And every time we drive by in the bus, even though you've seen it every day, and even to this day, when I'm in Harbour Grace, you can't help but look at that eerie ghost ship. It's just, it's a sight to behold. And as a matter of fact, it's actually famous because I remember one time attending a parliamentary seminar when I was actually Deputy Chair of Committees in the Speaker's office back some years ago. And it was then Speaker Trimper who was Speaker, and we held one of the conferences in Goose Bay, in Happy Valley Goose Bay. So of course we had parliamentarians and speakers and deputy chairs and deputy speakers, all who traveled, and we had the conference in Goose Bay. And part of the entertainment during that seminar weekend, the feature for the entertainment was the smoke room on the Kyle. And so here we were in Labrador, and we were talking about the smoke room on the Kyle. So it just goes to show, it's appreciated, and obviously the Kyle has a great rich history that I would encourage anybody to look up as well. It's interesting, and how it was used to transfer supplies and people between here and Labrador. But lots to see and do, of course, in the district. Again, Portagrave, we have the Heritage Society, and of course the renowned boat lighting, the Christmas boat lighting. And that event keeps, extends and gets bigger and bigger every year. And it's not just provincially renowned, but it's across Canada, but even internationally. And one of the organizers, Joyce Morgan, who I give a big hats off to, I call her the unofficial mayor in Portagrave, put so much into it, along with all the harvesters and what they go through. And but it's captured, it's garnered international interest, and it's a sight to see. So lots to see and do. We're coming up on our summer season. So come on out. And hats off to all of our volunteers as well in Harbour Grace Portagrave District. There was a lot of volunteers just for to contribute to the success of the Song, Stages and Seafood Festival in Bay Roberts just last weekend. We will be celebrating the Klondike Days. Spaniards Bay, Tilton have summer events. Upper Island Cove, Harbour Grace, as I mentioned. You know, there's lots to see and do out there. But that said, too, now I will make my way and move on to some priorities for the road work. Certainly have been fortunate to secure a lot of resources and support for road work since becoming MHA. But that said, you know, there's always more work to do, and in particular, the South Side Harbour Grace is in need of some road repair and maintenance. And also, we're kicking off. We secured significant funding through the federal government, in conjunction with both provincial government and the municipal government, to install water wastewater projects. It's phase 1. I think we announced over $5 million of that last year. So that work hopefully will soon get underway in Harbour Grace. It's something that those residents have been lobbying for and wanting. And as a matter of fact, it was actually a promise when Southside became part of Harbour Grace, the municipality, back in the day, that promise was made by the town council of the day to have water and wastewater infrastructure on the south side. So we've got the phase 1 approved, and certainly committed to working with the town, the municipality, and all levels of government to get that work underway. We do know that we have a short construction season here in our province, so the sooner we can get at that, the better. Also, Bishop's Cove has a lovely scenic location in my district.
I ask members to keep it down a little, please. I'm trying to hear the honourable member.
Thank you, Speaker. And a guide rail replacement. That's something that took quite some time. It was a larger project that had to go to tender. It wasn't something that the local depot could handle for local employees there. It was a larger project, and it took some time, you know, to advocate and to lobby and to work with the department. But finally, that funding has come through. It's gone to contract, and now the guide rail is replaced in Bishop's Cove. And anybody driving along Bishop's Cove, especially residents, would appreciate this because of the huge drop to the ocean. And Speaker, I don't know if you've ever had a drive through Bishop's Cove.
This weekend.
All right, you spend a lot of time in my district, Speaker. But take the tour. There's a lot of beautiful scenic things, and that takes us to then Bishop's Cove, down into Upper Island Cove, where there's been a major fossil discovery. That go back years and years and years. So that's quite interesting, and it's a beautiful scenic community, Upper Island Cove. And Upper Island Cove is situated, of course, between Bishop's Cove and Bryan's Cove. And that said, I want to commend the volunteer firefighters across my district. You know, the Bay Roberts Fire Rescue, Spaniards Bay Tilton Fire Department, Upper Island Cove Department, which looks after Bishop's Cove and Bryan's Cove, and of course the Harbour Grace Volunteer Fire Brigade. They work together all the time, you know, when need be. I mean, the Veterans Memorial, of course, stretches across my district, so when there's an incident there in the Veterans, all departments typically respond. And as I mentioned, we had some wildfires that have already occurred in my district this past season, and again, they're there to support one another. And I do know that Upper Island Cove now has submitted an application for a new pumper fire truck, something that's needed. It's, you know, the volunteer firefighters have made me aware of this priority. Again, Chief Harvey Mercer, his dedication is second to none, as are all of our volunteer firefighters. Their dedication is there. And they've made me aware, of course, that this is a priority. We just recently, a few years back, actually secured a rescue van as well for medical calls, because they respond to a lot of health calls as well. Now that's something that we're seeing, and they have the training. The medical rescue unit was the latest addition a few years ago, to the Upper Island Cove Department. But again, Upper Island Cove is responsible for Bishop's Cove, the residents there, as well as Bryan's Cove. So the more that we can do to support them, that's what is needed to help these men and women do that job. I know Harbour Grace as well is also in need of a vehicle. Bay Roberts has received one, just last year we announced. But again, the more we can do for these volunteers, these first responders, we need to be there and to ensure that they are equipped with everything that they need to go out and into those conditions on all of our behalfs. And as well, I spoke earlier today about the search and rescue personnel. Again, the Avalon North Wolverine Search and Rescue. They help with everything. They help with traffic control. Recently, I want to congratulate the class of 2026 at Ascension Collegiate. Graduates, of course, they had their prom ceremony just a few weeks ago. And, it was a very proud moment for them. But hats off to the search and rescue. They were there to help with the crowd control and the traffic control and that organization. And they also help out at the Harbour Grace Regatta. So these groups, these volunteer groups, they're there for the communities 24/7 in every season, every time of the year, through the positive, happy events, and of course when an emergency occurs, they are there to step up. Also, I would like to talk about, to pick up where my colleague left off, how we got in talking about Muskrat Falls. I was also a journalist at that time when Muskrat Falls was being brought in back in the time of that administration. And I can remember Speaker Bill 29 was also introduced here on the House, on the floor of the House of Assembly. And that was ultimately, Bill 29 blocked access to information. I'm not sure if you were in the House then Speaker. I'm not sure. Yes, I think you were then. Some people were here. But again, I remember the reaction in the newsroom when Bill 29 was introduced and how it was a block to access to information. That's right. And what it did then, so then we saw that we know there was a big filibuster then in the House at the time. The Liberals were in opposition, and I remember watching it and tuning in. And I mean, there was a huge filibuster to stop this legislation from passing. But as we know, it did. But what we do know about that project is that we went alone. We went it alone. We didn't have a partner per se to help build and develop that resource. And one would question why, because we do know previous to that, every premier, as was mentioned here earlier, had tried to crack and renegotiate and fix the 1969 deal that was made, of course, in Joey's time, as my colleague just referenced. And again, we have to ask, were the experts brought in to do the negotiation at that time? I mean, was the knowledge there? Was the education there? Clearly, we didn't end up getting on the best side of that long term. But we do know, again, as I said, and premiers of every stripe had taken this deal to court to have it open. We know it wasn't successful at the time. Quebec was ruled that Quebec did not had to reopen that deal, renegotiate that deal. But we do know that we're in another interesting time in our history where Quebec is in a big need for the electricity and for that power. And we do know, based on what we did hear from the international experts that were brought in just last year, and I mean, that's an unprecedented event that we saw here unfold here in the House of Assembly when the experts were seated down here in this part of the chamber, of course, and again, international experts, no one with any political ties or any, family ties or whatnot to what's happening here with regards to Newfoundland Labrador politics. But those internationals, the best of the best, were brought in here to negotiate on our behalf and to have an open, transparent process. And it was in January. I remember it was an old Christmas day when we reopened the House. It was something that the opposition parties of the day were calling for, and it was something that was granted by the previous administration, our Liberal administration, by then Premier Fury. And we do know that these international experts were here, and then they certainly didn't have to agree and be subject to politicians, elected officials here on the House, the floor of the House of Assembly, and also go before the media. And they took questions from the media, and there were no restrictions. It was information. It was very transparent. There were no secrets. There were no corners. There were no, there was nothing hidden at that time. And it was free for all. Anybody could ask questions, and there was no restrictions. And it would be, given that the promises that were made, and again, it was something that I heard on the campaign trail, and I'm sure each and every member here who went and knocked on doors, there was conversation about the MOU, I would say, in every district. Because everybody has been paying attention and watching what's been happening with our history. And now, of course, we are rich in resources if they're managed properly. And there was concern about it, and what was clear is that the Premier now of the day made promises that there would be a referendum, that nothing would go forward until it was brought to the people, to the everyday common person here in our province to have their say. So that was a promise that was made. So, and again, we don't know, we haven't got any answers as to when that question has been put to the Premier today, because this is not just a little event that's coming. This is a huge event in our history that could change life. Again, life changing for the people of our province. And again, there's a time, and a constituent brought to my attention that said how they'd like to see it better explained about how that money and the money that was said by the international experts that we stand to gain the billions of dollars, how that could help life for people here in Newfoundland and Labrador now. and how it would help with cost of living measures. Because you know what? There are people out there, there's people of different income brackets, but there are people who are struggling. It's realistic struggle for making decisions, whether it's medication they're going to buy, what kind of foods that they're going to buy, and how much food they're going to buy. Again, we talk about power bills and electricity bills, and I'd say, it's time for Newfoundland Power to introduce smart meters infrastructure, so consumers can have an input and better monitor their own usage to give them control, like we see in other jurisdictions. That's something that should be done, because we know power bills are very high, and I mean, I've even heard and seen constituents say in my district that their power bill is comparable to another mortgage payment that they're seeing on a monthly basis. I mean, it's just up and it's down and it's up and it's down. So, and we do know that without the rate mitigation protection from Ottawa, that they'd even be more, that it'd even be double, all because of the way a framework of a deal, how it was structured. It's great to have a resource that's renewable. It's great to own the resource. We're not really getting the benefit of that right now in this per generation. And as my colleague said, his grandkids may avail of that, but it's still very, very costly. And it's still something that we need, and we rely on Ottawa. So we hope that there's a plan in place, because let me tell you, we heard people taking to social media, calling our constituency office, talking to the media, the news media. But imagine if those power bills have jumped from 700 to 900 now next year, or when the rate mitigation is due to expire. It's something that's very real. It's not something that the other side likes to hear, but it's something that we have to deal with. These are facts. It's not an opinion piece. I hear chuckling over there, but that's fine. They can think it's funny, but I tell you one thing, the people of the province do not think it's funny, especially those who are threatening to have their power cut off. Imagine the stress that puts on seniors or the person, whether it's a Newfoundland Labrador housing recipient or whomever hears that threat. We're going to cut your power because you can't pay your bill, because you can't make ends meet, because of cost of living measures. So I say there's much more that can be done. We debated income tax bills here earlier today. There's more that can be done. We do know there's more revenue coming into the coffers with regards to the oil, what's happening in the Middle East. As bad as that situation is and as dangerous that situation is, ironically, it's enriching the coffers here. So there is room to do something to help people now. Not to wait, not to biff it down the road, not to give an excuse that it's permanent legislation, because we can always come in here at the will of the House to come in here and debate legislation and to change legislation. So there are measures that can be taken right now to help the people. And I will remind this Honourable House and yourself, Mr. Speaker, that the promises that were made on this campaign, the recent campaign trail in the fall, lower taxes, safer communities. We're not seeing that. It was all lip service up until this point, because we're not actually seeing those tangible actions. We're not seeing them. We could go further with a gasoline tax reduction. We could come in here, we could remove provincial sales tax temporarily, if need be, from power bills. We do know the situation that we're in. We have the ingredients to be a rich jurisdiction with regards to our fishery. We have I always say, we have the best product in the world, the best seafood product in the world that Newfoundland Labrador has to offer to the world. Our natural resources, our renewable resources, of course, what we're seeing in the Churchill River. So you know what? This shouldn't be political. This shouldn't be up to one person or one group to decide who gets to see what negotiators and what experts are giving. That shouldn't be made the call of one person, because I would be fearful. You're going to make that call, you're going to shut the public out, back like when we saw and when Bill 29 happened, when Muskrat Falls was sanctioned. You're going to go down in history, and you're going to be remembered for that. So the decisions that are made here in this House, you're going to be remembered for that. So I would encourage the leader of the day, the premier of the day, be open, be transparent. You promised this. You were very bold and loud to say that when you were making your promises to voters. So I'd say honor those promises now. Let us in, let the people in, not as well as the people here in this honourable House, but let the Newfoundland Labrador public know who is advising, what are their credentials, as the leader has raised. We know that the credentials of the international experts who were put on record and their titles were here back in the day, so why the big secret? This is everybody's Newfoundland and Labrador. This is everybody's resource. It doesn't belong to one group of people. It doesn't belong to one individual. It doesn't belong to one premier. I say it's for the people. Those were the promises that were made, and that's what we'd like to see. And now, as an official opposition, it's a different role, but it's the role that the people of the province have assigned our administration, and that's what we're going to do. We're going to ask the questions. It's about facts. It's about facts. There's no place. There's no place for rude behavior, immature behavior, or chuckling and laughing, or trying to intimidate a member into not speaking or not asking the questions, because that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. I will take my seat now, Speaker, and I look forward to speaking.